Even Livia and Bruno are visitor professor at our programs.
Okay, I see. Very glad to meet you.
Livia and Bruno are visitor professor at our programs. Then I will talk in Portuguese before Livia will host our meeting. Boa noite a todos. Temos aqui 11 pessoas assistindo. Seria legal que vocês interagissem aqui no site, organizassem as perguntas. Antes de passar a palavra para a nossa anfitriã da noite, a professora Lívia Milani, que está fazendo o pós-doutorado aqui no nosso programa Santiago Dantas. Também agradecer a presença do nosso outro professor pós-doutorando, que a semana passada lançou um livro importantíssimo, que depois a gente vai fazer aqui a propaganda, o professor Bruno Teodoro Luciano. A professora Lívia vai fazer a apresentação do professor Miao. But first of all, Professor Miao, thank you so much to attend our invitation. It's a great pleasure to meet you again, even by online chat. But it's better than nothing. Okay? Thank you so much, Professor Miao. Bruno, Lívia, a palavra é sua. Você vai coordenar a nossa mesa. E já agradeço a atenção. Obrigado.
So, hi everyone, good evening. So today we are here to discuss the political impacts of United States and China tech competition. And our guest is Professor Miao. Professor Miao is a professor at the China Foreign Affairs University. He is also a research fellow at the Institute of Asian Studies and a parallel Asian Studies Center at the China Foreign Affairs University. Also, he holds a doctorate degree in political science from the School of International Studies, Hanyang University of China. His research interests cover Japanese politics, China political decision-making, and Sino-Japan relations. So we are very happy that he is here with us today. And now I'll pass the word for him. So Professor Miao, you have the floor now.
Okay, thank you very much. First, let me share my screen. Oh, sorry. 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 So, Marcos, can you see my screen?
Yes, but not clear, because something inside of a thing, other thing.
Oh, sorry. So I'm not actually sharing the slides, right? Hey, Marcos, can you see the slide now?
Yes, now we see it.
Yes, political effects of U.S.-China technological competition. Sure.
Oh, so now I need to put to click the share icon, right? Oh, I can. Is this okay?
It's okay.
Okay. Good morning, Professor Marcos, Bruno, and Livia, and very dear friends. Very good morning or good evening. I'm sorry. This is my first. I would like to thank Professor Pierce Marcos for your very kind invitation that allow me to have this great opportunity to discuss about the very recent China-U.S. relations and the effect regional on bilateral relations or globally. As you may say, sorry. As you may already observe that two most important factors define the world's most recent development. The first is the pandemic, and the second would be the U.S.-China strategic competition. And actually, the two happenings events are mutually related, with one actually reinforcing the other. Today, I'm as required by Professor Pierce, I'm going to talk about the practical effects of the U.S.-China's technical cooperation, competition. Generally, we believe that U.S.-China's technical competition is one of the important aspects or episodes for the more general U.S.-China strategic competition. But this actually, the U.S.-China technical competition constitutes one of the most decisive factors for, say, all opponents for U.S.-China strategic competition. As you may say that from 2018, the former U.S. leadership, Donald Trump, has waged actually a trade war with China, and actually this has a lot to do with the technical competitions or the technical side of our relationship, and he has put forward many policies or many acts to limit the Chinese technical progress, or trying to prevent the Chinese achieving some very sensitive or high-tech, high-end technology that may jeopardize the U.S. Technical supremacy. Actually, we can observe that there are generally 6 or more aspects for the U.S. Policies to restrict the Chinese technical progress. And the first policy that he has made is he had tighter than most export restrictions on an expanding list of key technical products to be exported to China, and especially based on the Export Control and Reform Act in 2018, the U.S. has listed the first 14 types of technologies to be imported. To be imported to exported to China, which covers the artificial intelligence, the quantum computing, and chips and chip manufacturing design. And we say that many American companies are affected, like Google, Microsoft, Intel, Qualcomm, and we have still a very long list of other companies, like including the British ARM. and say that these restrictions were further expanded to 58 companies. And later we believe that now we already have a very long list of technologies and companies that were restricted to have a technical cooperation with China. And he also say the United States has also imposed the so-called sanctions over the Chinese high-tech company Huawei, and you probably have heard the important case of say the deputy head of the Huawei company is still now under review, undergoing legal process in Canada. And also we say many other international companies like the Netherlands SML company has also been affected, since it is not allowed to export its most advanced chips manufacturing instruments to China. And we say that the U.S. actually is not say waging the tech war on China individually. Actually, it is working with its alliance, especially it is urging the UK and Germany and France to rule out the Chinese Huawei from its state purchase or state service supplier list, especially in the field of telecommunication, in the name of security. And we say that Japan is also under pressure. And since 2018, the Japanese government is also establishing a new economic review division under the National Security Council. And we see the most recent happening is that the United States is employing the Quad, the quadrilateral dialogue, which covers the United States and Japan, Australia, and India, as a security dialogue. But now they are trying to work on the high-tech sector, especially in the rare earth sector, as well as the vaccine production added recently. But probably they will be working on supply chain, especially the high-tech area too. And the third would be that the Americans and the United States is now has very tight or rigid review of the Chinese overseas investment in the high-tech sector, especially in the United States, through the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act. And the Department of Justice had also put forward an action plan in 2018, especially review of the say the Chinese investment in the United States. And you probably heard of the TikTok case that the Donald Trump administration has had imposed a lot of pressure on TikTok to give it to operate in the United States, and even force TikTok to give up its company, its U.S. branch. We see a third or a fourth actually is very related to the review of the Chinese overseas investment, is that it is say trying to say revitalize actually not revitalize, because United States already enjoyed technical supremacy. So, but in say for fear that the Chinese economic progress may gradually conclude the gap with the technical gap with the United States, that may pose a threat to the U.S. high-tech industries, to high-tech say, and also security concerns. U.S. is now trying to invest very heavily in the technological sector, and through some high-tech mergers, especially the NVIDIA ARM company merger, trying to create some the super world's leading corporations that are able to compete with the Chinese emerging ones. And also, the U.S. has adopted the policy of a so-called reindustrialization, which aims to pull back the overseas investment of American companies, and of course, it also seeks to attract international high-tech companies to invest in the United States in order to build a secure and complete, very competitive high-tech supply chain. And of course, the recent policy would be to attract investment from the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company, which is the leading one in semiconductor manufacturing, and also Samsung from South Korea. And you probably have noticed that the Biden administration has continued many of Donald Trump's policy, but one thing is very different is that he poured very massive investment in the R&D sector, which were the most recent regulatory act would be the Anti-Disclosure Act in mid of this year. We see that it is not only a head-to-head competition with China, but actually U.S. is operating or conducting a lot of policies that jeopardizes conventional or very normal international cooperation in technical area. And we say that China constitutes the largest source of foreign students in the United States, with annually over 400,000 Chinese students studying in the United States. But now the U.S. is trying to tighten, or limit the access of the Chinese students and researchers in the science and the most the so-called sensitive sectors of artificial intelligence, robot computing, and 5G, among others. And also we see that the United States government is now, through its multiple administrative organizations, is now reviewing the American scientists' collaboration with China, with Chinese universities and institutions, and except many of the very renowned scientists that has been punished for failure to disclose their cooperation with China. And we noticed that by far, close to over 180 Chinese scientists in the United States has been received this kind of warning or legal punishment. And of course, this kind of high-tech competition has also affected people-to-people exchange. We see that U.S. has tightened its cooperation with China regarding the Confucius Institute, and in the name that the Confucius Institute may be used as by China as spying the U.S. technology, or we see it is also regarded as a kind of concern for the so-called Chinese exerting political influence or even ideological or free of speech. So this is not really true, but this is definitely a policy. And I see over 80 Confucius Institute in the United States has been affected, and most famously the very important, the most important scholarly exchange project of Fulbright has been cancelled. This is this whole policy, this American policy has also incited a very different or differentiated response from its alliances. We see the a basic observation is that there is a apparent securitization of the economic policies for American allies, especially the European counterpart, Japan, South Korea, Australia, say the Chinese Taipei. So most of these countries or regions or economies are now reviewing its technological cooperation or economic cooperation with China. Especially, they generally are following the similar policy that the United States has been imposing on China, trying to avoid, making the United States unhappy, trying not to invite some legal risks for their companies. And of course, this is also a result of consideration for their alliance. We see that, especially we see the United States, the Japanese government has established a new economic security division and the National Security Council, as I mentioned, and it has also established a committee to especially reviewing its economic cooperation with China. And based on these status instructions, many business enterprises are actually now becoming very cautious in cooperating with China, either in their trade with China or in investment with China. And also, we see that the U.S. is motivating its alliance, and it is also on their own initiative that they are trying to cooperate with say within the alliance system, trying to achieve the so-called economic security by diversification of their investment networks, or say their trading partners. And also they are trying to cooperate with each other in some major technical in research and development. And we see that China was the world's leading producer and expert for rare earth, and for fear that China may instrumentalize the rare earth as an economic weapon in its game with the Western powers, they are now trying to work with each other for conducting research that are not dependent on the rare earth. For example, the United States and Japan, they are trying to work on trying to develop or design the electric vehicles, especially the engine or batteries that are not reliant on rare earth. Or they are trying, including Mitsubishi, the Toshiba and Honda company, they are already successful in developing a new engine that are not using rare earth, or they are using rare earth not produced by China. And say for the European counterparts, their response is that they are generally concerned with China's technical progress, for fear that it may undermine their security, economic security, or there may be security of their privacy data. But generally, they are not unhappy with the United States policy, since generally speaking, they remain major trading partners for China. And we see that European companies or the governments, they are somewhat cautious of a possible, say, U.S. and China technical supremacy that is out of control for the European countries. And also we see that some emerging companies, their response is very different too. And generally speaking, that say they are not trying to say immediately rule out of China from their market. Or they're, say, how do you see? They are not trying to keep their cooperation with China. So they generally are becoming more cautious too. So we can see that the ASEAN countries, in many of their leaderships announcement, official statement that they are not going to choose side between China and the United States, especially in the terms of technology, because they need technologies from both. And they have published an ASEAN outlook for the free and open Indo-Pacific that somewhat endorsed the United States initiative of free and open Indo-Pacific, but they also try to emphasize the so-called ASEAN centrality in regional process and trying to have a balanced relationship between the United States and China. And we also say that the Vice President of the United States, Ms. Harris, has visited Singapore and Southeast Asian countries. And during her speech, he also mentioned that Americans are not forcing the ASEAN countries to choose side between the two countries. So from here we can notice the policy propensities for ASEAN. I think Russia's policy, another major power, and also another formal technical superpower, Russian, that has some say in international technical architecture. It has also adopted a somewhat very we see subtle policy. Generally speaking, it enjoys the strategic partnership with China, and generally we have in-depth cooperation in technological sector, especially the military technologies. But the Russian's policy is now I see subtle is that it is not happy, and it actually it is against the United States technical hegemony, and also his policy for some multiple sanctions and restricting the companies from other countries, which were actually not falling into the legal domain of the United States. But along the other way, that Russia itself is also observing what may happen between what would be the result between the U.S. and China technical cooperation, and it is not going to choose side between the two sides, and it also has its own policy to enhance its innovation in order to keep its say within the technical arena. And we see that Latin American countries, where we were actually generally adopting a much more neutralized policy too, and not actually, it is based on its geographical proximity with the U.S. and its economic independence, and all with the United States as well. And also on the other side, most Europe and Latin American countries are enjoying expanding economic relationship with China. So I believe that generally speaking, it would be in the interest of Latin American countries to keep neutral, and this is generally accepted policy, I believe. And for African, China maybe we may have say some influence in Africa, given our long-term engagement. And under the China African Cooperation Forum, we have been providing and empowering many African countries in technical sector. So generally speaking, the African countries are open and happy to cooperate with China, and they need the Chinese technology. And we believe China is quite generous in technical transfers to the African continent. but it's more kind of assistance. So we see that the United States technical war on China has been invited very different reactions or responses from developing countries or developed countries, and the world's technological relationship may be reformed transformed by this grand happening, and also the international relationship too. And what's the effect of say a strategic cooperation? Competing or technical competition with China. So we have several observations. Is that based on the dependence between China and the United States, this technological competition may be managed, but there are also observations that say this technical cooperation will be kind of a deadly one, that will become very antagonist. That say each side will regard it as a kind of a part of a total technological war. If failed, it will be a kind of another or pure war for China. Or for the United States, it will be kind of lost for its technical supremacy. So this is also one of the predictions by some say pessimistic scholars. We see that China and the United States, actually we have a different say advantages and disadvantages. For the United States, say it is a long-term global technical leadership, and it has advanced technology. It has also the best models for innovation in technology, and it's a leading technical company that account for around half of the world's technical sector, and especially for the the operating system for software for the computer or laptops, that it has a market share of almost 98 or almost 100%. And China, it's very difficult for China to really overcome this United States primacy. And even though China is concluding the gap, is making a lot of progress, we see the U.S. still holds the largest number of data centers and research centers all over the world, not only in the United States. And we say in the scientific citations of scientific publications, the Americans account for over 40%. And we see the Chinese progress in the 5G sector actually are still based on the United States technical institutions. So actually China, I believe, doesn't really have the strength to overcome all the US primacy or trying to build our own system. I believe this is very difficult. But of course, China has some advantages for its technical progress too. And number one is that we have the largest market, right? We have 1.4 billion population, and we have per capita similar to Brazil, which means that the overall PPP may have already overtaken the United States. So this great market and the market size probably can enable China to invest very heavily on its technology, but also it will be a market that no company can really abandon or really give up. So this is maybe constitute the pressure for the United States government if it continues to do so. And we see that, and also China very recently are investing very heavily in the science and technological sector. And you probably already noticed the Chinese technical say achievements in space exploration, in high-speed train, airplane, and also we have, say, in supercomputing computers, or even in the tokamak, we call man-made sun, or some energy sectors too. And China is a leader in solar power and in electric cars. So in many of the innovations, and China has also accumulated a lot of experiences and strength in the internet-based economy. So we believe in the shared economy too. So generally, we believe that China, we also have some advantage, and not need to mention that we have a reservoir of very large engineers. We have 8 million graduate students every year. College students graduating each year, and half, which means roughly 4 million Chinese are majoring mathematics, mechanics, physicians, and technology, some other technologies. And also we have a state-driven, or we have a system that enable China to make long-term and say consistent investment in the technical sector. We see that the Chinese recent policy would be what China could do, and the recent policy would be that China the competition with the United States, or we see the war from the United States, is making China to increasingly relying on its own, say, innovation instead of through international cooperation. But of course, we still bid for international cooperation with scientists all over the world, and we are still open. But we are now trying to rely on our own say innovation and to conclude the gap. And now we have already been developing the Chinese, producing the Chinese chips, which are maybe able to be sufficient to feed the Chinese market by 2030. So this is one happening. And say this said, we believe that the effects of the trade war on China is still very serious, and China actually suffers a lot from that. Especially that many of our technical programs or technical updating programs or international cooperation programs has been called into stop. And many Chinese companies, especially Huawei, and say the Chinese semiconductor manufacturing company, they have been affected a lot. And Huawei even was forced to sell its smartphone and brand owner to other company in order to have chips from the imported chips from the United States. And we see that for the China United States, this is as I mentioned, it is an episode of overall U.S.-China strategic competition. It's also a catalyst for worsening the China-U.S. relationship, since it has worsened the further worsened the mistrust between China and the United States. And now we have a widespread nationalist tone, and either among diplomats and politicians and grassroots people, netizens, and the antagonist sentiment between the two countries are still growing strong. And also this spillover tech communication has making, in the Chinese side, we believe it showed the Americans say its kinship on its hegemony, and say its unhappiness with the Chinese growth, which we believe is not really fair. So this in turn making the Chinese government or the Chinese political decision makers believe that the US are really trying to contain China instead of claimed say triple policy of cooperation, competition, and say confrontation. And of course, many people are talking about a new Cold War between the U.S. and China, especially because of the technical competition. But generally speaking, I believe that this is not the possible case. And say the U.S.-China technical cooperation not only have its effect on China and on bilateral relations, but I believe its influence are rather global. The first is that this China-U.S. technical competition has displayed the revolutionary, or we say the fearing effect or power of technical progress on international relations, especially we say the artificial intelligence, we say the quantum, and we see many say advanced technologies are really transforming the way of our life, the model of our economy, and of course reforming international relations too, because it will soon change the political economical landscape in a very unexpected way, or at least very different from the traditional technical progress. And also, the U.S.-China technical competition may lead to a very divided world in terms of technology. Instead of a kind of decoupling, or instead of two separated camps, as many people have observed, we believe that a real decoupling may not be possible, but partial one is already the reality. And the world will continue to be divided, since many countries, especially the allies and those countries with close ties with the United States, may have to choose between the two sides, the two approaches or two systems. And we say that actually globally, in terms of political science and philosophy, we believe that this technical competition is now favoring a lot of strong government, and also government intrusion into the market. Since we say the United States, China, and European countries, Japan, many countries, including Brazil, many countries are now investing a lot, and they trying to make instructions and guidelines for innovation sectors, for high-tech sectors. Well, actually, this may negatively affect the market mechanism. So in the other world, though many countries, especially the United States, claim themselves to be guarantee for democracy, or protector of democracy or liberalism, but actually their policy to compete with the so-called authoritarian China may, on the other hand, leading to a more authoritarian, or at least adopting an authoritarian approach of their government themselves. So this is the paradox. And we see that a fourth possible happening may be that technical gap may widen, especially between those with advanced science and technology and those developing countries that were not able to conclude their technical gap, since the international technological cooperation affected, say normal technological transfer affected, and say their cooperation policy become more maybe more cautious. So this is also a very possible scenario. And of course, the international relations and diplomacy will be directly and now already changing, and not only for US and China, but for many countries. But last, I want to assure a little bit that say we see that there will not be China-led international order as the United States has failed, or as many developing countries has been worried of. since that in terms of the material, and I believe China still has a lot to conclude, a very large gap to conclude. The first is that we are now undergoing economic slowdown, which means that the technical progress, though we have a will to invest, but we don't know, it will be constrained by our economic resources. And also we have a relatively low, say, per capita GDP, which means with our purchasing power, which means our policies relying on domestic consumption may render limited result. And of course, the military gap between China and the United States are still very great. We believe that it is almost impossible to conclude. And the technical gap too. And of course, there are many more important, we say soft ones, since technical comprehension is not only a science or technology, it concerns a lot of things, including the institutions, the innovation systems, education, and maybe we believe generally it would be related on some ideological or ideational aspect of a society. So in terms of this, we believe China will still far lag behind, and we still need to, or we are yet to really build our own advantage. And of course, if you want to continuously scale up your technology and have a greater say in the international world's technical architecture, you need to have some key alliance, either as an alliance in a traditional term, but also say alliances within international technical corporations, technical organizations, international standard making, international rule making, and also very importantly, China, we believe we are still lacking in leadership. We have our influence and our international say is generally expanded as a result of our economic growth, while actually their expertise, vision, ideas, and say their individual capability all constrained and all need to be made up if you really want to have the proper or have an advantageous position in the international technical architecture. And of course, we have a lot of domestic challenges too, that we need to pour a lot of resources, and we need to really focus in order to keep our regime safe, in order to keep our, say, economy continue to grow, even though at a relatively lower pace. But we need to get to be stable first. And of course, the external environment is not very friendly for China now. We know that we have a lot of disputes in East Asia, in the East with Japan, with Vietnam, with the Philippines in South China Sea, and we have border disputes with India. We have the Afghanistan most recently happening. All this may affect, say, the Chinese external cooperation. Especially, we know that the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which were regarded as the the mega investment projects, but also a kind of the Chinese strategy is now heavily affected by the pandemic, and also affected by the external environment too. So for this, we believe that actually this is still need to be checked and qualified within the technical competition or cooperation sector, instead of really allow it to spill over into an overall confrontation between China and the United States. And I think the other powers, European ones, the Asian ones, Latin American, African, the middle powers especially, they will play a very important role in guiding or navigating the future of the US-China strategic or technical competition. And also, I believe that the many Chinese believe and claim that the international society may not really agree or really believe that China doesn't have an interest or intention for hegemony. This is also what our foreign minister Wang Yi or our even president has claimed to the United States for many times. They tried to assure but failed. But I still want to emphasize this, that we actually is really domestic focused policies, domestic politics focused, inward looking. Even though we have a lot of trading investment relationship with more than 140 countries. We serve as a leading trading partner, and we are now second largest investment. But generally speaking, we believe the Chinese international outlook, or our outlook for international order, is still inward looking, and still it is not based on hard power or say those material strength, but more importantly, Chinese thinking more about those civilizational ones or cultural topics, which means China will generally still remain inward-looking, say peace-loving countries instead of very expansionist ones, as the outside may be worried of. Okay, I would like to stop here. I'm sorry that I didn't provide a real systematic or say a good assessment of the U.S.-China technical competition and make a reliable assessment of the U.S.-China general or overall relationship. But we see we still have some time. I would be very happy to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miao Ji, Xie. I think it was actually great. I think you covered many issues and many relevant issues for U.S. to China relations, and also the impact for the rest of the globe, which is also interesting. We do have a couple of interesting questions from our students watching on YouTube. I'm just gonna share them with you. So the first question is from Rafael Codesso. He asks, how do you see the results of China's effort to locally develop the semiconductors needed for the physical structure of 5G? And yeah, you can see it on the screens as well. And I have a question quite linked to this one, because you at some point you mentioned about the effects for other how the U.S. and China relations impact other emerging countries in both Asia and Latin America. And then perhaps the case of the 5G technologies, it's interesting because it may perhaps it questions whether or to what extent these countries can still remain neutral in this scenario, right? So at this point, they're going to have to choose some technologies, and then they're going to have to choose whether this technology is coming from China or the US. At least this is how Donald Trump has framed this position at some point. Another question is from Ana Raquel Fortes. She asked, how has China been handling the creation of the International Development Finance Corporation, DFC? This bank created by the US has worked on several technology-related agreements in Latin America. So she wants to hear your opinion about this one as well. Yeah, and just another question, and then we wait for a second round of questions if students have more questions. But also, you mentioned that China has no interest on hegemony on your last slide, right? Do you think this is just about the global hegemony, or maybe China is interested in at least a regional hegemony, right? Focusing on Asia Pacific or just the neighborhood countries. How do you see this? So thank you. You're free to address the questions the way you want, and then hopefully students we're gonna ask more questions in the second round as well. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, thank you very much, Bruno. So let me try to. I'm not a technician, or I'm not a scientist, so it's very difficult for me to assess the exact position for China, for China's technical progress, or the Chinese technical position in the world arena. But what you see, we have a general idea that the Chinese Huawei, we have some advantage. We do not say overall technology or China is a leader in 5G, because 5G needs long-term development, and I believe this is almost accidental that the Chinese, the Huawei's leadership, they had the vision to plan for the 5G long ago. And of course, it has been investing very heavily on the research and the development. So it is I believe it is also a plan based on his vision. So we have some advantage, but I want to say the 5G is a very large family of many technologies. Well, China actually we are somewhat developed in terms of say the middle up side spectrum of the 5G family, and actually because of the restrictions of the United States and many European countries, and the actual ruling out of the Huawei's investment, or say as a supply provider for 5G services for most OECD countries. So actually, the Huawei is now building a very conventional telecommunication systems all over the world. It is a leader, but it's mostly in economic size. It is mostly in scale. It is mostly basic infrastructure and construction. It has nothing to do with the high tech. Nothing to do with those very very advanced ideas of that may undermine their economic security or national security. And the most importantly, I believe it's it is generally providing services based on the United States technical system, based on the United States technical foundation laid down before. So generally speaking, I don't believe the Chinese 5G is really leading the world. When we have some progress compared to our economic side, compared to our formal technical status, but it's not really not yet a global leader. And this is first. Second is we have a lot of problems in terms of semiconductors. You know that semiconductors concerns millions of small semiconductor families, and also it's a full spectrum of supply of economic industrial chain. Well, actually, say we are only producing or manufacturing the medium or relative lower end. Now a little bit middle to upper end of semiconductors. We are not, and mostly we are developing them. Huawei has designed several very good chips, but we need to realize there need to be someone that be able to produce that only the Taiwan semiconductor company, say, and the Qualcomm from the US, ARM, and also say Samsung can realize that. So the Chinese, even if you can design some high-end chips, you are not able to realize that. So this is also the problem. And given the very big scale of in millions of semiconductor family, it's very difficult for China to conclude. We are now have a national plan. We invest very heavily, and if ideally and hopefully we may be able to supply the basic need for our industrial use by 2030. I mean, only industrial use and media, only the media ones. So more than 50. Actually, for the high end, more than 80 of them, we still need to import from the United States. So this technological gap will not be able to conclude it within a very relatively longer time, say 1 decade or 2 decades. It's very difficult. So I see this. And so in terms of policies for Latin American, Asian, African countries, I believe it's not difficult to be neutral, since the technical relationship with China is also part of first is somewhat independent from your relationship with the US, and the second is that most of our cooperation with China in semiconductor industries are still, say, industrial use, and they are not really high-tech area. It doesn't concern real national security or economic security. So generally, this is also a technical cooperation. So it really doesn't undermine the United States, high-tech supremacy. So if U.S. is more keen on those ones that may enable China to gain great advantage, especially in terms of technology. and also I want to say that like the telecommunication, like the Huawei telecommunication system is reliable, good technology, and relatively much cheaper. So it fits to the need of many developing countries. And the United States, even if it destroyed Huawei, it doesn't have the ability, doesn't have a factory to provide similar services. So this is the problem. That means we still have a very strong need from them. So generally speaking, I believe it also relies on the third-party countries like Latin America, Africa, and Asian countries. It depends on what they do. If they neutralize the policy and continue the cooperation, both with the United States and China, while managing the risks to be involved in the bilateral competition, there is a possibility. Because I believe that it's a more of a market issue. It's not really a technical issue in our relationship, technical cooperation with many developing countries. So this is the first. Sorry, the second is DFC. The DFC is American companies that are operating and trying to review a lot of infrastructure projects. It's a financing organization actually sponsored by the United States government. And its purpose is trying to compete with the Chinese so-called Belt and Road Initiative, especially this infrastructure sector. And it is now doing a lot of involved in some projects. I see some projects, and also say some kind of a reviewing or standard making related operations in several countries. But it is not really investing heavily in the so-called high quality infrastructure development in many countries, because the US doesn't have that massive human resources, doesn't have that strong will to really invest in the infrastructure sector. I believe that it's not Americans' priority. And it has a blue dot, if I'm right, it has a blue dot project trying to review the so-called quality and the standard of the infrastructures in many projects for many countries. But generally, I believe, following the same logic as the semiconductors, it is more generally about supply and need issue based on market principle. So many countries are welcoming the Chinese investment in infrastructure or corporate infrastructure, and we have this strength in this sector. And it is not really related to the high-tech sector. So, which means it is not the really priority of the United States. Though it has a general policy to check the Chinese expanding influence, but I believe infrastructure financing itself are not really, or will not necessarily bring to expanding influence of a certain country, as was the experience of China has indicated. So I believe this is no problem. If in the future there's possibility, I believe China should cooperate with the DFC of the US project to make the infrastructure development in developing countries better, more reliable, maybe cheaper, more accessible. It's not really, we shouldn't say it in a competitive way. And a third question regarding about the Chinese, if we cannot bid for global leadership or hegemony, can we choose to have or do we bid for regional hegemony? Do you mean this? If I'm right. So generally speaking, I believe that our influence in the Asian Pacific is somewhat established. We already have some strong influence in Asian Pacific, since we are leading partners, trading partners for almost all countries. We are almost the number 1, 2, or leading sources for investment, and we are providing aid and conducting infrastructure development in the Asian Pacific very, very widely, and so our influence is there. But this influence is very different from the American influence, I believe. It is related on hegemony. It is related on having people to do what you want to do. But for China, it's different. We didn't force other countries to do anything. We have non-interference policy. We don't force other countries to do something. Of course, we hope people to do something we want, but we don't force. And also, China doesn't have that strength to force other countries into our agenda. And more importantly, I believe that our cooperation is still based on still in the economic sector. We are not trying to build an alliance. We are not trying to build a regional integration organization governed or controlled by China. Still far away. So still doing business, investment, trade, infrastructure, people-to-people exchange. That's good. But I believe that will not lead to hegemony. Hegemony must be based on, say, military, especially the United States. Second, alliance. Third, institutions. So we are not able to build the Asian version of the United Nations, or Asian version of a bank, or Asian versions of governance organizations. So this is very difficult. Even the European Union have a problem. So I believe we don't have these institutions. And third is that the nature of if you call this hegemony, the nature of the Chinese foreign policy different from those hegemonic ones. So because how do you say, hegemony means is a kind of how you deal with other countries. Do you use more coercive means? Do you use more military means or diplomatic means, or do you use more economic or traditional diplomacy means? Sorry, I don't know if I have already properly answered this question, but my guess is that we have a regional strong influence, but it's not hegemony, and we will not have hegemony. Thank you.
No, fantastic, Miao-ji. I think it was great. You managed to address all the questions very thoroughly, so thank you so much for this. We do have a couple of questions on YouTube. Let me share them with you. So the first one is from Vitor Almeida. He asks, does the PRC have a strategy to deal with the domestic challenges, particularly Taiwan? It seems that the Taiwan issue would bring about a coalition against China. Our dear Professor Marcos also asked, he says that you mentioned some of China's weakness, but what would be its strengths to position itself more actively in the international system? And we do have a third question from Samara Guimarães, also a professor at in this module, and she asks if you could expand on the revolutionary effect of technological progress, high tech, that you mentioned in terms of IR.
Okay, thank you very much. So the first Taiwan issue, how do you see? China has Taiwan issue is a very difficult one, and actually even though diplomatically or politically our leaders often claim that it is our domestic issues, and we are opposed to any international interference. Generally, it is already an issue highly internationalized, and given the United States the intensive and increasing involvement in the Taiwan issue, I believe that for Taiwan we have very systematic strategy. But this may not be called strategy. We call policy. We have a consistent Taiwan strategy. The first is that we still stick to the so-called one country, two systems. So this doesn't really appeal to Taiwan very much because Taiwan deems itself different from Hong Kong and Macau. So it doesn't really accept the one country, two systems. But we still believe this is provide a basic mindset or a philosophy for China's policies in terms of Taiwan, which means we are based on negotiation. We try to bring Taiwan together without interfering or changing the Taiwan's lifestyle, system, governance system, economic structure, anything. So we only need to be the jewel and the facto part of China. So this is most important. And our policy is very different because Taiwan, we believe, is our own issue, while the international society intervene very much in it. So our policy is more responsive to the outside change. But generally speaking, we try to have more diplomatic relations. We try to reduce or try to policy, try to establish a diplomatic relationship with all countries that have still maintains a diplomatic relationship, including 6, maybe more, roughly 9 or 10 in Latin America. Try to make them switch to China. This is possible, if it is possible. Of course, this is not hasty, and it is not should not be done in a coercive way. So it's only still we trying to hope to do this, but I believe it's not easy to do at the moment. The second is that we have to manage our relationship with the United States and with Japan, who believe they have an intensive interest in Taiwan. So our policy is that it's still a dual one. First, in terms of a sovereignty issue, we are opposed to any interference, or say we have the anti-separatist, anti-succession law for Taiwan against Taiwan. So if there's 3 conditions, like a foreign military occupation of Taiwan, or instability, major instability from Taiwan. Third is protractedly long delay or postponing for reunification. So under 3 conditions, China will use any force or use any means to reunify Taiwan or solve it. So this is the kind of anti-succession law. So which means if there is, we say, some contingency or substantial changes of Taiwan status, like going to independence, declaration of independence, or it's like a foreign military occupation of Taiwan. Occupation not only means occupation against Taiwan's will, but means military bases or military armies in Taiwan or foreign country, either by cooperation or coercion. We will respond. We will consider every means. So, but generally speaking, we believe now all this the status quo is in the policy, in the interest for almost all parties. So China is still trying to manage our relationship with the United States, with Taiwan, with all countries. And we encourage economic or non-governmental cooperation between Taiwan and any country, including Latin America. So this is our general policy. So it's not really not a strategy. Our formal, if we have a strategy to, we call trying to win the hearts of Taiwanese people and seek peaceful reunification. But we now increasingly say this is impossible or unlikely. So we no longer see it as a strategy. So our strategy is trying to maintain the status quo, manage the risks, and also try to deter the external power to really intervene in Taiwan issue, and also trying to deter Taiwan from independence. So this is policy. Sorry, the second policy, second question, I forget. I didn't feel to take note. Sorry, can you?
Yeah, it's this one from Marcus. You can read it, right?
Okay. So I mean, what would be the strength to present itself more actively? So I mean, yeah, we do have some strength in the international system. The first is we need to say we are like Brazil. We are a traditional great power. So first, and this was already established during and after the Second World War as one of the permanent members for the Security Council, and as a nuclear power, and as a major contributor for almost all international organizations. So for say within the existing order of United Nations, World Bank, IMF, and say Asian Development Bank, and also this is financial, and also institutional ones. We have international organizations, other organizations. We are almost a major contributor and an important player, I say. So generally, our international position, policy is generally assured. We have this traditional strength or traditional foundation. While now, what makes China strong, or what makes China's influence, or say expanding international system, would be the first economic development, because China is now second economy, and we contribute to roughly one third or around 30% of the world's GDP growth every year. So this is economic contribution. And third, our partnership, China is #1 trading partner with 140 countries. So this is also important. Benchmark indicating China's strong ties internationally. And of course, we are now Chinese. We have the Belt and Road Initiative trying to provide some public goods from other countries. So generally speaking, we are now try to scale up our reform our educational and technological and say environmental issues, and also China try to be a leader in addressing global change in solar power, new energy, in contributing to carbon neutrality. So many physics are supporting the Chinese growing influence and growing role. But I believe most importantly, and most important thing from China would be our domestic growth. If our society remains stable, our economy remain growing, and say our domestic reform will be successful, that the people are satisfied with our government, and I think China is already ready. We already have great power. We don't need to bid for really international influence or global leadership, because it is a natural skill. It is something that you gradually naturally have. Instead of you win or you gain, you endeavor to have a while when you do not really have that strength. So this is what I observe. A third would be one more question from Samanu about the revolutionary effect of technical progress. Sorry, this is somewhat difficult for me to elaborate since I am not a scientist. But generally, I believe now a lot of happening, a lot of new technology like artificial intelligence, right? We know that the United States is not trying to send troops to Afghanistan to the Al-Qaeda or to other places. Instead, only send unmanned attack airplane, or missile based on accurate or concise location. So I believe the GPS system, and integrated intelligence. So based on great big data, artificial intelligence, maybe global positioning. So, I mean, such technology already transforming the way of war, transforming the technical architecture, technological and science architecture in a very symmetric way. And also we have some other new ones like robot, auto driving, and we have the quantum computing. So I mean, and of course space exploration. So I mean, many of the technology, including internet itself, many of the technology are unknown, including the biotechnology and the human gene engineering. So I mean genetic engineering. So many of them are really changing almost all the way that our world are based on now. So I think there will be, and our human beings are welcoming a new revolutionary. It's not by any single individual technology, but by the overall technological development. So this is something I want to mention. But how far this technology goes and what's the risk that we have for it remain to be seen, and we need to be very cautious. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miao. We do have another question from Marcus. So let me read it for you. You mentioned authors who emphasize traditional Chinese culture in the formulation of Chinese foreign policy. But what is the influence of Marxist theory in this process?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marcus. Professor Marcus. This is a great question for me. How do you say? Generally, I want to say that Marxism remains to be one of our, fundamental ideology So we generally, if you say what ideology China have, we have a Marxism, of course, because we are socialist country. We have a different regime, right? And also, second is, I believe most important one is our traditional culture. Our traditional culture, I believe we already have a lot of ideas about other Confucian tradition. We have also we have the Taoism, or we also have the Buddhist tradition. So this is say something more broader based on the three streams. So this traditional culture, I believe, are now becoming the new focus of the Chinese society or elites. Marxism, since it's almost we almost take it for granted. So now not so many people are talking about Marxism here. And of course, honestly speaking, many people do not really believe Marxism now, since that our lifestyle, our market economy, our development already many people believe very capitalist ones. So we have market economy, and the people very capitalist, they hope to be rich and trying to find all kind of ways to be rich, and they are not caring very much about loyalty, morals like we did in the past. So somewhat our society is very capitalist one. So many people, especially the youngsters, this Marxism ideology remain I see a discourse for them. So they live in this discourse, but they no longer talk about it. They not really know the essence or really believe in the essence of the Marxism. But in the terms of the elites, we believe that Marxism is not really the traditional one. We believe the synthesized, the Chinese-ized or synthesized Marxism already integrated or merged the Chinese Asian traditional culture and our modern development. So it's no longer the fundamental Marxism as we believed in the past. So which means that Marxism is still very important and remains the leading or official say ideology for China. And so how do you see? And I shall say maybe for all Chinese, but say we see that our society is already very different from 40 years ago, and very diverse. People's beliefs and people's ideas and people's vision, knowledge of the outside is very different. And the Western influence in China is already systematic. It's already become ours. So I believe, of course, generally speaking, it is not remain so influential as it was in the past. And it is not an often adopted topic because it's more like a discourse that we live in. It's not a actual discussion. Sorry, Marcos. My simple unprofessional answer to you as a real professor. So maybe we can discuss this later.
Okay, Professor. Thank you so much for your answer. Please, Livia and Bruno and Samara, take the floor and congratulate our friend Miao.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Miao. It was really great. It was quite interesting, and we are very honored to have you here today. So thank you.
Thank you, Livia. Thank you very much.
Samara?
Thank you so much, Miao. I think you touched many different points throughout your presentation. I'm very honored, as Eva says, for having you here with us today. And I hope to see you again in the next presentation, next conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Samala. Thank you.
Professor Bruno.
Our students are also thanking you. And yeah, I think it was a great talk and hope to collaborate with you in the future. And thanks for joining us in this module. I think it was great. 谢谢.
Thank you, Professor Bruno. Thank you for moderation. Thank you very much.
Professor Miao,
Yeah.
a big hug to you. Thank you so much for participate of our discipline. It's an honor for us, and I hope that in the future we can shake hands to drink a Maltai and said Campei when you visit Brazil or we will visit China. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, a big pleasure to us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me say a few words. Thank you very much. First, Professor Marcos, again for your kind invitation and your kind words. I look forward for a beer with you in Brazil or Beijing, and also Professor Bruno for your kind moderation. Thank you very much for your introduction or your moderating the Q&A section, and also Olivia and Professor Samala. Thank you very much for your participation. And I really look forward for more discussions with you on very important and interesting topics. And you are, of course, you are all welcome to visit Beijing when the pandemic is over.
I hope. I miss Chinese food, the Pai Zhou, Ti Zhou, and another things.
Okay, thank you. We have Beijing roasted ducks. We have a baked room, lambs, everything here, and I have a cupboard of a good wine, Chinese baijiu, for you.
Thank you so much. I will speak in Portuguese to our audience. Pessoal, muito obrigado por vocês participarem do nosso evento hoje. Lembrando que na próxima quarta-feira, 15 horas, a gente vai ter a apresentação do professor Gabriel Balbo, que vai continuar também com a perspectiva da competição entre China e Estados Unidos na questão do 5G. Bom, muito obrigado, boa noite, bom descanso. Professor Miao, one more time.
Thank you.
Bruno, Lívia, Samara, grande abraço.
Okay, thank you. Obrigado. Bye.
Bye.
Obrigada. Tchau.